Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into some seriously profound source material today. We are unpacking a deeply philosophical, honestly challenging critique of morality, religion, and human hypocrisy. The author of this text pulls absolutely no punches. They're challenging us to look way past superficial labels and ask ourselves what actually defines a virtuous life. You know, whether you consider yourself deeply spiritual, entirely secular, or maybe somewhere right in the middle, this text totally demands your attention. It forces this radical reevaluation of how society judges goodness. So let's unravel this incredible piece of writing together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right off the bat, the text hits us with this paradoxical hook. Who is actually more righteous? Is it the person who openly denies the existence of God, but lives a life of profound moral integrity? Or is it the religious leader who wears the robes of piety but is secretly engaging in quiet corruption? The author uses this question not just as a neat thought experiment, but as a mirror held right up to society. It completely sets the stage for a total redefinition of virtue.
Section 1. Redefining the atheist.
So the text kicks things off by ironically detailing the characteristics of what it considers the most noble, selfless people in society. According to the author, these are individuals who genuinely fight for the hungry and the poor. They're the ones who look at their own wealth with total disdain when they see a starving child. They actually sacrifice their comfort, their wealth, and literally their lives for the betterment of others. Plus, they completely reject religious vanity, they outright refuse to exploit the vulnerable in the name of God, and they detest using spirituality as some sort of excuse for luxury. But here's the crazy irony the author points out. Society often mislabels these incredibly virtuous people as atheists or unreligious, simply because they refuse to participate in the theatrical showmanship of organized faith.
And this brilliantly illustrates the author's biting sarcasm. The text argues that our societal metrics for faith are just so broken that a person's refusal to commit spiritual exploitation is precisely the thing that gets them branded as an unbeliever. The author highlights how society will completely ignore actual sins, yet rushes to condemn the people who simply refuse to put on a holy mask.
Section 2. Defining true humanity.
This builds directly onto the author's core philosophy. On one side, we have the true human. The author argues that humans are inherently flawed. I mean, if we weren't, we'd be gods, right? The true human is someone who admits those flaws openly, expresses their true thoughts without any hidden agendas, and refuses to blame their own weaknesses on others. Now, on the flip side, the author contrasts this with what they describe as an animal, or even a demon. This is the hypocrite. This is the person who hides their ugly nature behind a veil of saintliness. They're driven by selfishness and this terrifying fear of losing their public fame. They say one thing but do another, and worst of all, the text claims they find actual enjoyment in tormenting the weak.
Which brings us to a remarkably bold claim from the text. Referring to those honest, flawed humans who openly admit their mistakes, the author writes, "If a deity ever incarnates in a human, it will be in them first." It's a huge philosophical mic drop. Divine qualities, according to this essay, do not belong to those who pretend to be perfect. Divinity is actually found in absolute honesty, vulnerability, and having the sheer courage to own your human flaws.
Section 3. Unmasking the false deities.
The author actually pauses the essay here to ask this incredibly powerful, direct rhetorical question. Who are they? Let's take a second to let that tension build. Who are these people claiming to be the ultimate arbiters of faith?
The text neutrally lays out a highly charged profile of these religious leaders. The author accuses them of acting as self-proclaimed gods, positioning themselves as the sole protectors, promoters, and teachers of faith. Yet, behind this immense authority, the text alleges they commit grave sins without a second thought. The author goes as far as calling them priests of adultery and oppression, claiming they use divine idols and sacred traditions merely as a shield to maintain their luxurious, exploitative lifestyles.
The author draws a really sharp dichotomy here. Publicly, these figures are viewed as ascetics, absolute devotees, and master teachers of religion. The public literally bows to them. But the private reality, as alleged by the source material, is that they are filled with lust. They take the pure offerings given by devotees and spend them on personal vices, and their daily actions are entirely removed from any true concept of religion. It's this stark contrast between a carefully crafted public mask and a deeply corrupted private reality.
Section 4. Corruption in sacred spaces.
The author walks us through a tragic timeline of how innocent devotion is systematically corrupted. Step 1. Devotees, often mothers, sisters, and the impoverished, bring their offerings with absolutely pure faith and profound love. Step 2. Instead of serving the divine or the community, the leaders siphon these donations to fund their own personal luxury and desires. Step 3.
Consequently, the text argues these once sacred spaces are transformed into dens of thugs, thieves, and vice, entirely dependent on criminal elements to maintain their power. So, the crucial point is that the author is making highly specific, intensely charged accusations against these corrupt institutions. The text describes private quarters of these leaders reeking of alcohol. It claims temples and ashrams are used as safe havens for goons. Most disturbingly, the author points to the harassment of female worshippers who arrive with deep religious faith and the predatory targeting of the very little money the poor have to offer. It is a fiercely grave critique.
Section 5. A Call to Awaken. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the author actually invents a powerful contradictory term for this, Dev Danav, which translates to deity demons. It perfectly encapsulates the author's view of these hypocrites. They present themselves as deities, Dev, to the public, but behave as demons, Danav, in private, greedily swallowing up the pure devotion and hard-earned resources of the faithful.
But the text doesn't just leave us with despair. It outlines some very actionable steps for society. First, we got to open our eyes and look at these showy, pompous religious figures without the blindfold of blind faith. Second, we have to start asking the hard questions. Is our devotion and our money actually reaching the divine, or is it stopping halfway? And third, the author demands that society actively protect its offerings and its faith from being systematically looted by these actors. We have to stop blindly funding our own exploitation.
Which leaves us with this final, genuinely provocative thought derived directly from the text. Is your devotion reaching the divine or the demons in disguise? The author really challenges us to look critically at the institutions we trust. True humanity, as we've learned from this text today, isn't about claiming perfection. It's about honest, selfless action. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into the paradox of belief has sparked your curiosity and given you a new framework for looking at the world around you. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.